On the shores of the Potomac River, there is a beautiful city, conceived by the Founding Fathers to be a resounding statement of a new nation's intentions, symbolizing the idea they had labored hard to bring into being. A new kind of government, built on the will of the people and based on the concept of freedom of the individual. The Founding Fathers have been duly honored in this city, for time and experience have proved the rightness of their noble experiment, suggesting that anything that would alter the basic principles that underlie the government they bequeath to us would be tragic indeed.
It was quite a challenge, what we set out to do.
Design a brand new government where freedom could debut. We were independent, we fought to win us that.
Now what to do with what we'd won was where we found us at.
We gave you freedom, we gave you rights to do what you set out to do, no matter where you set your sights. We gave you freedom, so shout hooray! Enjoy it with all your heart, don't let it get away.
Our aim was to form a government of defined and limited powers that would keep peace among men, so that as individuals they might enjoy their fundamental rights and attain a maximum of personal development and happiness.
Our intent was that the people, not the government, possess the absolute sovereignty, and that the interest and rights of every class be duly represented and understood in the public council.
We wanted a government that should express the sober thought of people, rather than their haste or passion.
We felt that a nation with the raw materials of a continent at hand, which would devote itself to orderly labor, might rise as a society to a plateau of gratifying living. Not sumptuous, but comfortable. Quite comfortable indeed.
We gave you freedom, we gave you rights to do what you set out to do, no matter where you set your sights. We gave you freedom, so shout hooray! Enjoy it with all your heart, don't let it get away. Don't let it get away.
Alongside the monuments to our heritage of individual freedom, there stands another Washington, a symbol of government that has grown out of control, one that would replace traditional freedoms and incentives with paternalism and regulation and interference into our personal and business lives. This is the government that has quadrupled its budget since 1962 and doubled its national debt in the past 8 years. It is a government that imposes a tax system that discourages incentives, personal savings, risk-taking and investment. A government whose policies have led to a rate of inflation that threatens to destroy the value of our currency, wreck our economy, and lower our standard of living. It is a government that causes Americans of average income to work the equivalent of 5 months every year just to pay all their taxes.
Hold on there. Can this be the same limited government we bequeathed to the nation in 1789?
Is this the government we carefully designed to have no powers other than those few we specifically enumerated?
It would appear that the point has been reached where a penny saved is no longer a penny earned.
That certainly is not the way we planned it.
That's not the way we planned it. That's not what we had in mind. That's not the kind of government our document defines. That's not the way we planned it at all. That's not what we chose to do. That's not the private enterprise we handed down to you.
We believe that a government without checks and balances is merely an elected despotism.
That's not the way we planned it. That's not what we tried to do. That's not the freedom that we thought we passed on down to you. That's not the way we planned it at all. It's so hard to comprehend. A plan that proved so workable, now so undisciplined.
In framing our government, we recognized that we must first enable the government to govern the people. But we also had to structure it so that it would not go out of control.
Which, of course, is why we structured the government with 2 legislative houses, a single president with veto power, and a strong judiciary, each providing balances and controls against excesses of the others.
From such balanced controls, we envisioned there coming an harmonious order where useful labor of individuals, not government, would produce the necessaries and comforts of life.
That's not the way we planned it at all. That's not what we tried to do. That's not the freedom that we thought we passed on down to you.
We thought we left you freedom-bound, instead of the other way around.
That's not the way we planned it at all.
Pray, however was this overextended government permitted to occur?
It didn't occur for many years. In fact, not until well into the 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt clearly expressed the prevailing view of government to this point in history, and it was essentially the same as that of the framers of the Constitution more than 125 years earlier. Fundamentally, the welfare of each citizen, and therefore the aggregate of citizens which makes the nation, must rest upon individual thrift and energy, resolution and intelligence. Nothing can take the place of this individual capacity. But wise legislation and honest, intelligent administration can give it fullest scope and the opportunity to work to good effect. This concept of individual responsibility had given Americans the incentive to work hard, to innovate, to create new ideas, to go into business, to create new products and services. Millions of businesses grew and prospered, providing jobs and supplying people's needs. The federal government provided support for the booming private sector, protecting the rights of all, but not interfering in the private affairs of individuals or the states. That, of course, was how the Founding Fathers intended it.
Indeed. The powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people, and extend to all those things that concern the lives, liberties, and the properties of the people.
At the outset of the 20th century, the federal government had a budget of a little over $562 million. Nearly all its revenues came from customs duties and taxes on alcohol and tobacco. The first big jump in government came during World War I, when the nation's full resources were mobilized. After the war ended, there was an effort to get government back to normal, but it never did return to its pre-war size.
Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many
under the domination of the few.
The 20s were a time of economic growth and prosperity. Wages and prices were high. There was widespread speculation as people used their savings to buy business securities. Abruptly, it all ended with the stock market crash of 1929. Investors lost their money. The economy lost its steam. Millions of people had no jobs. They were looking for help anywhere they could get it. Almost overnight, there occurred the greatest change in our system of government since the ratification of the Constitution in 1789, a turning to government to try to solve domestic, economic, and social problems. Dramatic and controversial programs replaced free market approaches to business and agriculture, and for the first time, people began to look to government to help meet obligations that they formerly handled themselves. It was a time of great personal and national stress. World War II followed right on the heels of the Great Depression, another major stress on the nation. But this was the kind of stress that the Founding Fathers expected the government to handle, and handle it did. Government growth spurted again, and the war was won. But by now, the idea of big government had caught on. Agencies and programs that had specific meaning and purpose in times of economic depression and wartime emergency stayed on when times returned to normal. What was to become a massive government bureaucracy had been formed.
That's not the way we planned it. That's not what we had in mind. That's not the kind of government our document defined. That's not the way we planned it at all. That's not what we tried to do. That's not the freedom that we thought we passed on down to you.
Really? Your turning to big government's a bit of an embarrassment.
That's not the way we planned it at all.
45 years had passed since the start of the 20th century. The government's budget had grown to $92 billion in 1945, the final year of World War II. But even more significant, in 1946, a new approach to government was actually spelled out in legislation. It is the continuing policy and responsibility of the federal government to promote maximum employment, production, and